I thought it would be kind of cool today just to sort of start off with just a real quick rundown of our top 5 favorite boxing stories.
Well,
and maybe a little commentary on what.
Yeah, Mark, real quick, is Tom Gianni here?
No, he went back.
Okay.
Yeah, he's had enough of our monkey shines. Yeah, yeah, that's that.
That's not limited to the costumes.
So, huh?
That's not limited to the costumes.
If you want to throw a kid out,
you
can. But we'll talk briefly about that, and then we're going to do a little reading. And then I've got kind of a special treat here. This is my top 5 list, and I'll go from 5 to 1. Sluggers on the Beach, which is Costigan dealing with a person who's very much like himself and can't admit it. This is one of my favorite narrative things. He's describing Red Houlihan in exactly the same way that you would describe Costigan, and he can't understand why Houlihan keeps getting on his nerves. Number 4, Viking of the Gloves, another one of my favorites. I'll read from that in a little bit. He's trying to get a boxing match going, and the whaling fleet and the seal hunting fleet are in, and so the port is, in his words, swarming with squareheads. Swedes fighting Danes, Danes fighting Swedes. He can't get a scrap, and so Bill O'Brien comes up with the genius idea of passing off Steve Costigan, a black Irish Texan, off as a Swede. And it's a whole lot like the scene from the Quentin Tarantino movie Inglourious Bastards, where Brad Pitt's trying to speak German or trying to speak French. Number 3, Circus Fists. It's one of the few times when Costigan leaves the ship and joins the circus. I love this one. Thank you very much. This is one of my favorites for its audacity. Costigan gets a job as the local strongman, punching out all comers.
Very, very reminiscent of John L. Sullivan's tour. 2 tours, actually.
Yeah, that's right. And Chris is going to talk a little bit about that. This has to me one of the most Frazetta-esque moments in the story when Costigan squares off and punches a lunging tiger and snaps his neck with one blow. And when I read it, I could see the tiger bunching up at the end of his fist and him at full extension in this Frazetta-esque sort of punch. It's always been just one of my favorites for that moment. Number 2, Breed of Battle. Many of you have met my dog back there. She's my heart. And when you have a dog, you give up a part of yourself. And one of the things that's really remarkable about the Costigan stories is how much affection he has for his bulldog, Mike. And this is the first time that Mike gets kidnapped. It happens 2 times in the stories. This is one of my favorites because he ends up posting a reward for the skunk who stole Mike, and we find out later he's the low-down dirty skunk that stole his dog. And nobody can read very well because he doesn't write very well to begin with. So all they could figure out from the sign is Steve Costigan is paying $50 for dogs. And so it turns the boxing match into a dog show as people keep bringing up things. And he's like, that's not even a bulldog, that's a chow. You're crazy, it's a fine bulldog. And so it's a wonderful one, and it's a really good. It really gets the relationship of him and Mike across in that wonderful way. And then, of course, my number 1, without even a bullet, no bones about it, the Destiny Gorilla. Easily one of the best stories in terms of construction, setup, and execution. It's got one of the most slam dunk endings of the entire series. Also, how do you beat a name like the Destiny Gorilla? I submit to you that if that was the first how a boxing story you saw, you would have read it first too. And it was the first one I read. I literally bought the Iron Man and the Adventures of Dennis Dorgan, the collected edition, and took it home, opened up the table of contents, went, oh, this is kind of Destiny Gorilla. We'll start there. And it was the thing that made me a boxing fan for life. Years later, when I did the radio plays for the Violent Crown Radio Players, that was the first Costigan story we adapted into old-time radio format. And I have a few of those with me tonight. I've got just a few left. If anybody wants to buy some, well, I've got them back at the pavilion after this is over. But those are my top 5. So if any of you guys are looking for a good place to start, those are great ones to start. Have you composed your top 5 yet?
I didn't know even know I was supposed to do that.
You think on it? Gruber, you want to step in next?
I didn't bring my list, but
You could.
But
I could do it.
Barking of the Gloves would
Yeah,
be my
that's
favorite.
also on my list.
Yeah.
And Bulldog Breed
Bulldog Breed?
would be Bulldog Breed was my favorite.
Yeah.
Would be number 1 on my list.
Bulldog Breed, yeah. Go ahead.
I have several of the same Bulldog Breed, Fighting a Spare, Vikings of the Gloves. Sometimes for different reasons. Fighting a Spare, I had a pit bull, a white pit bull at that I trained, and he was my best friend for a long time. My wife named him Cole. I wanted to name him Mike. He's Cole. The thing about it, though, is there's a number of stories throughout Howard's writing. It's not just relegated to boxing that center around the relationship between a man and his dog. Not just walking him to and fro, taking him out to the bathroom, but actual relationship with the dog. The dog actually takes on certain human traits, and Mike especially. But Mike the Bulldog has a personality this big, and he's really not in the story very much. He's been kidnapped. And Fighting a Spare also talks, the reason why he's been kidnapped is he's going to be fighting Richie's terror. Right?
Yeah, he's kidnapped to perform in a dog fight.
And Robert E. Howard lays out several paragraphs of how he feels about blood sports in general, not boxing, between two humans. And he explains why. There's a lot of Robert in the story, and so you're all fans of Robert E. Howard. And one of the reasons why I love the boxing story so much is because you get a chance to meet him, if you will. He's telling you how he feels about dogs. He's telling you how he feels about boxing, and there are certain sentences that he uses, certain phrases. A man is, what's the one where a man is lets his dog fights the low down skunk?
Oh yeah. He's lower than the dog himself.
Yeah. And basically, the personality of Bob comes out in a way that is very difficult in stories that are set in the very far past. It's a modern story, at least for the time, and you get a chance to see, again, Bob talking about the things that matter most to him. And I think that story was, the Fighting a Spare was written a couple of years after Pat's died, but Bulldog Breed was written very early. So we learned that Bob doesn't like dog fights, and we learned that Costigan will go to any lengths to get his dog back, and of course, Mark described the hijinks that occur when that happens, when he starts to use his brain for things other than fighting. But his heart is always in the front, not just with his dog, with everything. And Robert E. Howard liked to portray himself to other people as leading with the heart. Well, so does Steve Costigan. Again, the parallels between the two are very clear, very poignant. Bulldog Breed, I have never really cried at reading anything, or even laughed out loud. But when there's a section, it's the first time in a Costigan story where he's not going to get up this time. This time for sure, he does it in every other story, but this time he's not going to get up. And he says something. He says, a man's got to have something worth fighting for, something to get him going. He says, got to be, whether it's a woman, whether it's a great cause, and it mirrors a quote, or a dog. It mirrors a quote that he said to Novel and Price. And again, a parallel between Bob the person and and Costigan. And it's another window into the personality and thoughts. And I love those windows, obviously. I like meeting Bob Howard in modern terms. But Mike senses the trouble. Mike is in tune with Costigan to such a degree that he recognizes that my master's not getting up. I got to do something. No, and he said the way he writes it. Mike normally doesn't give tongue. He doesn't bark, but he barks this one time. He never barks throughout the whole series, but he barks one time, and he makes it sound like an old Irish church bell. And it rings sonorous, and he says, I don't know how I got up. I don't know how. I just looked into my dog's eyes, and I could see the soul of the fighting Irish. And he starts to blubber and cry with frustration. And he's doing it not for himself. He's doing it for his dog. And if you had a relationship with an animal like that, you'll feel it. and I felt it. And for that reason, Fighting This Pair and the Bulldog Breed are two stories that just really touched me. And that one made me cry when I first read that paragraph. Now, when I say cry, I'm not weeping like Weeping Willow.
Man tears.
I'm talking. It really did pluck at the strings of my heart, and I don't say that very often. And this is a story that if you really, really want to sit down for about 35 minutes and enjoy yourself, the expectations shouldn't be, oh, this is a great work of art. What it is, it's a human piece, one of the most human pieces in all the writing that Robert did, and it stands out so clearly for me that I'd like to share that with you. And ask if you want to borrow my book and don't want to buy these books, borrow it, read it, and you will, I think, feel the same way as I do. I also like Viking of the Gloves, Champion of the Forecastle. Let's see, that's 3, right? 2 more. Well, I like Hard-Fisted Sentiment. Some of the harder edge Costigans are not very popular, but I find them oddly comforting. There's a lot of machismo, manliness. There's a lot of honor being bandied about. If you've ever been in a room full of alpha males and one guy walking up and kind of bumps you, but he doesn't say excuse me, and you stand there going, yeah, that guy, I think he's bumming. That rising of not necessarily anger, but two bulls in a pen, who's the toughest, Right. And when you up it a little bit further, because that guy's a son of a bitch, and you don't really care how he feels about it. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
That's Tiger Valois.
Oh, Frenchie would do. When these kind of feelings are put on paper, it can be very clumsy in the wrong hands. It can be very transparent, and also people reading it tend to misunderstand. This particular story, The Honor of the Ship, everyone's a little older. Hard-Fisted Sentiment, a little older, past their primes.
Yeah.
There's, again, a human element that you don't really see with other characters as easy. When he is riled up, and the reason why he gets so riled up is because they're not really making fun of him, they're not poking fun at him, it's the shipmates, it's his ship, it's in trouble. It's always his gang, his family, his substitute family. The honor that goes with it and the way it's rolled out, it is a violent set of stories, but the violence is directed towards the people that you love. And the Elkin stories touch on that kind of pride in family and name. Costigan really takes it to an extreme.
Yeah, Costigan made his family out of the ship.
He did.
Yeah.
So for separate reasons, I think we agree on our top 5. But tomorrow, my top 5 will undoubtedly change. The only two that will be in there for sure are the Fighting This Pair and Bulldog Breed every single time.
Yeah.
Shanks, what do you got for us?
All right, I'm gonna break away from the mold a little bit. They've all been talking about Steve Costigan boxing stories, and of course I got a couple of Costigans on my list. But I'm gonna move away a little bit from just the humor stories and have a couple of straight boxing stories.
Okay.
Because they're overlooked sometimes. The boxing stories in general are overlooked. And then among the boxing stories, his straight boxing stories often are overshadowed by the Costigans. And truthfully, rightfully so in a lot of ways, because they're just so absolutely great. They really are. But I'm going to start like you did with number 5, and that is a Costigan story, and it's one that people don't put usually on the top, but that's Pit of the Circle.
The first one.
The first Costigan. The first published. First published Costigan. It's not technically one of the better ones. Yeah. Okay, it's not. I like it because it is a little raw, and the character's just introduced. Mike isn't a part of it yet. But in this story, it is one of the grittier Costigans, and he ends up having to fight in an underground bare-knuckle match in a concrete pit. But you can tell from Howard's writing, he understands how that works, and the differences between having to fight bare-knuckle and fight with gloves. And you're in there, and your elbows are getting scraped. On the concrete wall, and they're in there, and you think, this is like Bronson in Hard Times, right? When these underground fights, and it's a little raw, it's a little brutal. You can vision too. Look where we're at, right? Yeah. Where Howard's fighting, okay? In this enclosed space, there would have been crates and boxes of hay bales and people, hanging from the rafters, maybe literally. In these cramped confines, Maybe sometimes they had smaller roles than usual, or they were, he got that, he knew that, he did that in Pit of the Serpent. So again, it is one of the costumes, but I'll save Bulldog Breed for later because Bulldog Breed is my favorite costume.
Yeah.
Hands down. It's so good, and Chris brilliantly explained all it is. I can't top that.
No one can.
Hey, talk real quick, Jeff, because you're really familiar with how soon after Patrice died.
Yeah.
Right? And why perhaps it's such a good story.
Yeah, that's the story of Patch, right? And this was his dog, and it bothered him so much that he couldn't be here when he had to leave, and he couldn't be around when it took place. That's I don't think I can't read as eloquently as you. I mean, the power of that story. But that is a great one. If you're gonna read a costume, then I would say start with it. But I actually maybe you shouldn't start with it because it is the best. And after that, but they're great.
What's your number 4?
But let's move away from that was 4 and 5 or 5 and 4. Moving away from costuming because he does have some other great boxing stories out there. And another one that's this will be a little twist. Another one of my favorite boxing stories. It's also a humorous story, but it's not a costume. It's not Kid Allison either. It's Mountain Man.
Oh!
Let me
throw
a monkey wrench in there for you.
That is a monkey wrench.
Mountain Man was the first published Breckenridge Elkins story. Okay, after he was doing the costumes for a while, the next his attempt to move into a different humorous genre was humorous westerns with Breckenridge Elkins. Okay, he's this mountain man who's big and tough and brawny, but brains department he's a little lacking. So a lot like costume. Okay, now Howard, one of the things he liked to do when he would switch genres, he would often throw in an element from a previous genre that he was comfortable with. So his first Breckenridge Elkins, his first attempt at a humorous western, he throws in a boxing match because that's what he's comfortable with. That's what he does. And so he has Breckenridge Elkins, this dumb mountain man who's in a lot of ways almost a Conan-like figure. Okay, he's this barbarian figure down from the hills who is entering into civilization. And a lot like Conan, he's like sort of the monkey wrench in the cogs of civilization. And he ends up getting one thing leads to another, and he ends up in a boxing match. But he doesn't really understand boxing. He doesn't understand civilized fighting, with rules, pugilism. He's a guy that understands rough and tumble fighting, which is a mountain, frontier style of fighting with biting and eye gouging. You're trying to bite the guy's ear off and thumb him in the eye, and so he gets in this boxing match, and all he understands, you just want me to be in a fight? Sure, no problem. He gets in there, he promptly, gets his professional boxing, he promptly goes over and he starts chawing on his ear, right in the middle of this fight. And, it's really brilliant, and I love it because this is a transition for Howard in his humor, and he's moving out of the costumes, he's moving out of the humorous boxing stories into this new genre, which is also brilliant in its own way.
Yeah.
And he uses boxing, he uses something that's familiar and comfortable to him that he knows well in order to make that transition. And so that's another one, just to mix it up a little bit.
Sure.
Another one, and this is a straight boxing story, and it's one of the first ones he published. I don't know if it for the Beat Out Crowd Horror, that's the Spirit of Tom Mullen.
Yeah.
So Howard, one of the things Howard was great at was what today we would call creating hybrid genres, okay? Mixing different genres. We often talk about sword and sorcery as sort of a hybrid genre. It's him mixing horror with historical adventure, or weird westerns, mixing a western genre with a weird element. Howard would often do this as a way of having a story that he could pitch to different markets. If he did something like a Solomon Kane, like I mentioned earlier today, he could pitch it to Argosy as a historical adventure. If it doesn't sell, it's got a weird element, so wham, he spins it right to Weird Tales, so he's covered, right? Spirit of Tom Molyneux is a sort of one of these hybrid genres that didn't quite pan out. Weird boxing, So I can't imagine why that didn't take off. The way Weird Westerns did.
Can we put a pin in that for later?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, but the Spirit of Tom Molyneux is it's basically a ghost story, a boxing story. He was trying to break into Fight Stories at this time. Fight Stories, magazine had just come out. But again, he did the same thing. He put in an element he's comfortable with, which is a weird element, and so he made a boxing story where the champion, Ace Jessel, is rescued by the ghost of his hero, Tom Molyneux. And I love this just because of the reference to Tom Molyneux, who is such a great, amazing figure in boxing history, who is really lost to us today. But at the time that Howard was living, and if you were a boxing fan, you knew the Tom Molyneux, Tom Cribb fights from the early 19th century. They were the Ali Frazier fights of that time. They were legendary. Tom Molyneux was an enslaved American who supposedly, according to legend, boxed his way to freedom here in America, in Virginia, and then made his way across the sea to England, where at the time, the epitome of boxing was in England. That was the Regency period in the early 1800s. And the champion at the time was a guy named Tom Cribb, who's one of the greatest bare-knuckle boxers ever. Just phenomenal. The Black Diamond was his nickname. And so you have this, an American, a former slave from America in Regency period England, fighting. He came over there and he beat several of the locals, and he was, impressed everyone. He was, this amazing story. He ends up fighting Tom Cribb and lost, but it was a great story. So Howard knew this. How this again shows his knowledge of the history of boxing, not just the technique of boxing, but the history of boxing shows up in this story. And so that's one of the reasons I love it. Last but not least, the first boxing story, not just of Howard that I ever read, the first boxing fiction of any kind that I ever read was Iron Man. And I got that picked up the Donald Grant when I was in college. I had read the Conans, read all the, read the Sword and Sorcery, read the horror by that point. I got into college, I found the Donald Grants in the college library. And for the first time, I realized how many other genres that Howard had written. And I was a boxing fan already, always had been. And so I immediately, wow, he wrote boxing stories? And Iron Man was the first one I read. And this is maybe one of his greatest straight boxing stories. It's a brilliant story. The whole concept of the Iron Man is something that Howard wrote about all the time. This is a boxer who is maybe not the most skilled, but he's got a great chin. He can take a beating. And a lot of it was actually, the concept is kind of epitomizing a real-life boxer, a guy named Joe Grimm, who was just famous for taking beatings and losing all the time, but he could take it. He was tough. He'd always put on a good show, but he would lose all the time. And that's the main character of the story is one of these Iron Men, and that's it. It's just almost that feeling of being doomed hangs over this character. He's always going to lose. He's always going to take a beating. He's getting worse and worse all the time. His health is deteriorating. I mean, even at this point, we know a lot more today about concussions and the damage they could do. But at that time, they knew. They didn't have. They may not have had terms like
punch
encephalitis or whatever, but they had punch drums, and they knew what it meant. They are not encephalitis, in whatever it is. Yeah, exactly. But they knew, and this character is he's having to keep stepping in the ring in order to help someone, and he's doing it. He's slowly dying bit by bit as he throughout this story.
But he's got the great cause.
But he's got the great cause. He's got the great cause of women. That's what he does it for, even though he's dying.
So one of the women that. One of the few women in the boxing stories that doesn't do it in dirt.
That's true. That's right.
Yeah,
that's true.
It's a more mature look, even though it was early on.
Right. Do you have anything that you would like to add to this? Is there a story or a topic in the boxing story that we didn't cover that you think is?
I think it's important to know. I think I wrote that in one of the essays. I forget if it is second or third volume, but I think the important thing about the Costigan stories is that they are all about family. And I think it's interesting that it's the same also for the Breckenridge Elkin story.
Yes.
But the humorous stuff in Howard is always, in a way, connected to family. Because you see all the other heroes. You see Conan is a loner, and the other one is an outcast, an exile, whatever. They don't have any families. They don't even mention having fathers or mothers or parents, sons, children. Nothing. Except in Costigan. and in Breck Elkin. Breck Elkin is a real family. In the Costigans, it's a bit different. But the old man, to be transparent, the old man is Costigan's old man. And they all have the ship, and the ship is, I forget the name, sorry.
The Seagirl.
The Seagirl. So, and the Seagirl is the old man's ship. So it's strange, but she's a woman, and she's like a mother to everyone. They all live there in the ship, and you could see that the dog, Mike, is of course Patrice, house dog. So, and it's always, the stories are always about the family bickering because they are always a problem. And a typical Costigan story is, okay, the Seagull arrives in an exotic port, and Steve goes on the shore and he is having a fight, a problem, and at the end he goes back to the family. It's as if Bob Howard was in Cross Plains. Okay, I need to live adventures. I need to break away from here. And so he would go someplace, somewhere for a while, and after some time goes back home. And I think that's very interesting and very riveting in a way that you remember Bob Howard mostly for the grim and gritty stuff, and the funny stuff is family. And family is funny. It's good humor, good nature.
Without being sentimental, without being sappy.
Yeah.
There's a
And the language, of course.
The language
As a Frenchman, I think it took me a while to get used to what is. But when you get it, I mean, I laugh out loud, and that's rare.
May I favor you guys with a brief reading?
Oh, please, even the long one.
I got two things, and then I'm going to turn it over to anybody else who wants to do this.
If you can read the thing about the useless Swede,
I
I would love that. If you have never heard Mark read Costigan's story, you're in for a treat.
All right, this is it's from Waterfront Fists, just for you. I'll do this. I was going to do Viking of the Gloves because it's got it in there as well. But
While you're doing that, I'm going to pick somebody from the crowd to we'll
punch. Okay.
Yeah, well, we'll demonstrate the fine art.
Oh, that's cool.
This is the beginning of Waterfront Fists. The Seagirl hadn't been docked in Honolulu more than 3 hours before Bill O'Brien come legging it up down to the pool hall where I was showing Mushy Hanson the finer points of the game to tell me he got me matched to fight some has-been at the American Arena that night. The ruffian is in, said Bill, and they got a fella there which they swear could take any man aboard the Seagirl to a royal cleaning. I ain't seen him, but they said he growed up in the back country of Australia and run wild with the kangaroos till he was shanghaied aboard a ship at an early age. They say he's licked everybody aboard the ruffian, from the captain down to the mess hall boy. Stow the gab and lead me to some ruffian idiots which is craving to risk their jack on this tramp, I interrupted. I got $150 burning a hole in my pocket. Well, it was easy to find some lunatics from the ruffian after putting up our money at even odds with a bartender for a stakeholder and knowing I had a tough battle aboard ahead of me and needed some training. I got me a haircut. I then went down to the Hibernian bar for a few shots of hard liquor. While me and Bill and Mushy was lapping up our drinks, in comes Swin Larson. This huge and useless Swede has long been labored under the hallucination that he ought to be the champion of the Seagirl, and no amount of battering has been able to quite wipe the idea out of what he supposes to be his brain. Well, this big mistake comes up to me and scowling down at me says, "You, Irisher, put up your hands." I set my liquor down with a short sigh of annoyance. With 1,000 sailors in Point Easton for a scrap, you gotta pick on me. Go on, I don't want to fight no shipmate anyhow. I gotta fight the ruffian's man in a few hours. I should be fighting him, persisted the deluded maniac. I ought to be champ of the Seagirl. Come on, you big stiffer. And so saying, he squared off in what he fondly believed was a fighting pose. At this moment, a white bulldog, Mike, sensing trouble, bristled and looked up from the bowl of beer he was lapping up on the floor, but seeing it was nobody but Sven, curled up and went back to sleep. "Don't risk your hand on the big chump, Steve," said Bill disgustedly. "I'll fix him. You stay out of this, Bill O'Brien," said the Swede, swinging his huge fist around. "I will see to you after I lick Steve." "Oh, you're drunk. A fine shipmate you are." "I am not drunk. My girl told me." "I didn't know you had a girl here." "Well, I have. And she said the big man like me should be champion of the ship, and she wouldn't have nothing to do with me until I was. So put up your hands. The fight goes on from there, but you get a sense of the language that he employs, and it's one of the secrets to unlocking these stories for me was figuring out that Costigan is a Texan, and everybody else around him is from another stereotypical joke nationality.
Stereotypes.
And once you figure out that they're all broad caricatures of other things, it gets pretty interesting. If anybody else wants to read,
Mark,
Yeah.
can I request that you read a little snippet of Vikings of the Gulf, because that's brilliant in the way he does Costigan doing a Swedish accent.
yes, I will do a little. Yes, I will do a little costume. Let me get back there. Yeah, Vikings of the Gloves has one of my. It was one of the ones. Unfortunately, I don't have a recording of it, but it was one of my favorite ones that we did with the VCRP because with the language, I'm going to skip a little bit. Basically, like I said, nobody can get a fight because the Swedes and the Danes are being paired off. Bill O'Brien gets this idea, but one of the guys has hurt his hand. So all they got to do is run in a substitute, and they'll clean up. So they start going through it all, and so Costigan says, "Who do you think we can use?" "Well, there's Mushy," began Bill. "He was raised in America, of course." "Yeah, there's Mushy," snapped Mushy bitterly. "You know as well as I am I ain't no Swede. I'm a Dane myself. Far from wanting to fight, Hakon. I hope he knocks the block off of whatever fool Swede they could find to go against him." "That's gratitude," says Bill. "How can a brainy guy like me work up anything when it gets opposition from all quarters? I lay awake at night studying up plans for the betterment of my mates. And what do I get? Arguments, wisecracks, opposition. I tell you, pipe down," I said. "There's Swin Larson. He's a Swede. That big ox would last about 15 seconds against Hakon," said Mushy, with gloomy satisfaction. "Besides, Swin's in jail. He ain't been in port more than half an hour when he got jugged for beating up a cop." Bill fixed a gloomy gaze on me, and his eyes lighted. "Hot dog," he whooped. "I got it. Steve, you're a Swede." "Listen here, you flat-headed dogfish. Me and you ain't had a fight in years, but doggone it. Try to have some sense, will ya? This is the ID. You ain't never fought in Yokohama before. Neiman don't know you, nor anybody else. We'll pass you off for a Swede." "Pass him off for a Swede?" said Mushy. "Well, I admit he don't look much like a Swede." "Much like a Swede? Why, you son of a..." "All right, you don't look anything like a Swede then." "But I reckon if we tell them you're a Swede, they can't prove you ain't. If they dispute it, we'll knock the daylights out of them." I thought it over. "Not so bad," I finally decided. "We'll get that extra $100, and for a chance to fight somebody, I'd pretend I was an Eskimo. We'll do it." "Good," said Bill. "Can you talk Swedish?" "You bet. Listen to this. Jimmy Jackson yumped up on the Yankee bladder with his donkey yakted on. Yemeni, what a yump!" "We're pretty good," said Bill. "Come on, we'll go down to Neiman's and sign up." "Hey, ain't you going, Mushy?" "No, I ain't. I see right now I ain't gonna enjoy this scrap none. Steve's my shipmate, but Hakon's my countryman. Whichever loses, I won't rejoice none. I hope it's a draw. I ain't even going to see it." So, yeah, that's later on, the guy takes one look at Costigan and for some strange reason doesn't believe he's Swedish. I don't know how that got there. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to do? Because if not, I have a quick announcement. Would you like to read?
Did you talk, when I ran over there, did you talk about more than just what they used it for, but what it was like in here?
We talked, well, I told them that they fought it.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to point out tonight was the realistic nature of the boxing stories themselves. There is a crowd revels in the technique in the story. So when he describes a left hook, he's describing it as it should be thrown. But how to fight a lefty, how to fight a righty, these small adjustments that are made in an actual fight between fighters, he takes the time without slowing down the narrative. She's still plowing ahead. You can barely keep up with the action, and yet you get a blow-by-blow account as if you would have heard it on the radio or watched it on TV. It's that accurate. And one of the cool things I was thinking about, we could probably do like a quick little scrap right here. Because just imagine, see how people all ringed in here right now? Imagine this room, like you said, with boxes and crates, and you had a little area, you push the stuff aside, and it's been a hot day. You got some oil field bullies that wanna rub cuts and bump elbows.
Come into the light here.
Well, what I was gonna do is I was gonna pick one of you. How about you? Or you?
You want me to fight?
Because I don't want to fight any of you guys. But the reality is that he was right in here. You know, a little square area set aside. There's a picture that Jeff gave me of what it was like in an ice house.
That's your Tim Arney.
Tim Arney. Sorry, Tim. Yep. Tim Arney gave me what it was. You were talking about hanging from the rafters. So just imagine this filled with people sitting on boxes, sitting on ice.
Blocks
sweaty,
of ice in the back.
angry, pissed off, happy because you had some beer. And then when you have a little bit of beer, what happens when alpha males get together? You got a little bit of beer.
You got a bump of chest.
Yeah, there's a little bit of this, and remember last week when you said you could bail 10 more than me? You can't bail him like me.
I still think I can.
I don't believe you can.
I think I can.
Oh my God, why don't you get up there and prove it?
All right. In fact,
Yeah, get up there and prove it.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna really prove it. I'm just letting you know that this is where it goes. Right here.
Yeah.
So the feeling that you get when you stand here, you can see how big it is. It's not big. But just imagine your favorite author, I imagine at least one of your favorite authors, Robert E. Howard, right? That's why you're here. He was in here. He was walking up to people. Hey, Dave Lee, let's do this again. Come on out here, buddy. And you come out there and you say, come on, let's go. And they did. Strapped on the gloves with a bunch of people around them, laying down bets, swigging down the beer. It's exactly the kind of environment you might find in a movie. Or, like, if you're me, when I was growing up, we had our own little fight club, and we'd smack the hell out of each other. And everyone was trying to get higher and higher on the pecking order. So the fights you see in some of these stories were actually from something that he was probably doing right in here. And that's also another added element of honesty, realism, human element to the stories that, again, is just a gem to be able to grab a hold of something like that, stand in this pit of the serpent.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yes. Or the forecastle.
And visualize.
Yeah.
She's ready. Look at her. She's ready to kick me. I can see it. She's like, I am ready. She's gonna.
She'll switch your light too. You gotta watch her shine.
I'm short but scrappy.
That's right.
Hey.
Well, yeah.
I was going to say, right, I didn't mean to interrupt there. I thought you were finishing up. I was going to say, for some of the new people that are here, whichever way y'all want to do it, but explain, because Jeff was talking about how he would cross genres and try to sell to one, or if it didn't sell to go to the other. Explain Dennis Dorgan, because y'all haven't mentioned him at all.
Well, do you want to very briefly hit it?
No, he has to buy the book.
I'm talking about the new people.
Number 3, next one coming out.
Yeah, you'll get the full story in.
The full story is in there. It's a fascinating story.
But that's a boxer y'all haven't mentioned yet.
But long story short, Dennis Dorgan never existed except for one story.
One story.
One story.
Yeah.
Well,
You'll get the whole story in the third book.
what I guess I'm trying to do is I'm trying to relate to you. First off, how many people are even boxing fans? Very little, I imagine, right? You got a few.
Fabulous.
Yeah, 5 or 2. And yet, at the time that Robert was writing these stories, boxing was one of the 2 king sports. So I'm going to give you all the boxers, not just in his fiction, but in history. These men, especially the Irish boxers, they owe their boxing heritage going back to even before John L. Sullivan. But Sullivan really set the. In fact, I wanted to read something. One of the introductions, I talk about how much Howard and Costigan owes to a guy named John L. Sullivan. Who has heard of John L. Sullivan? A lot more people. Yeah. So he's a cultural icon. He set the standard for how a man walks, how a man talks, how an Irish man walks and talks. And we start talking about that whole honor thing. And when you read the life history of John L. Sullivan and a lot of these old time boxers, certain things are a part of their creed. an honor is certainly probably the highest honor, and that really hasn't changed much for really any group of people. But John L. Sullivan, like Jack Dempsey, they took America and the world really by storm, and the impact of the way he talked, the way he walked, the kinds of things he said and did in a bar. It's all what Eisenberg calls the cult of masculinity. And when I started reading about the cult of masculinity, I had already had an idea of what kind of person he was talking about. When I read Eisenberg and even Gorn, for that matter, I started to understand that Howard had tapped into Americana. He is an American writer. He's a Texas writer, but he's truly an American writer. I think you and I were talking in Patrice yesterday, and you're like, I really, boxing not that big, and boxing's never really been maybe Georges Carpentier perhaps, but not really that big in France and outside of England.
It was quite big at the beginning of the 20th century, beginning of the 1920s.
Well, that'd be Georges Carpentier's.
That's it. And after that, it kind of waned.
Carpentier, but
I'm not French. The idea though is
he's being cocky.
that Howard, when Glenn Lord unfortunately passed, some things came to the front. I had always long suspected and jabbered my jaw about John L. Sullivan. Listen, look at how he talks, look at how he acts, look at the things he says, look at what Koskinen says, how the fight tours. I mean, there's so much in there. And then I got a hold of this, thanks to you. There's a letter. It's from the Right Hook. It's from the Right Hook. Explain real quick while I find the page what the Right Hook is.
It was a fanzine that Howard wrote. He wrote 3 issues of it, probably just for a handful of his buddies. And it's full of short articles about boxing, lists of people he liked, why he liked them.
He was 19 years old when he wrote this, okay? Yeah. And this is from 1925. Yep. This is after he's got a partial classification of my own list of the greatest champions in each weight division. So here he is. He's expounding in this round robin magazine, and all he does is talk about boxing with his buddies. Now he's 19 years old here. And I like John Sullivan. I know that he was a whiskey-soaked bum, but I'm a bum myself. I like him more for what he stood for than what he was. Now, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of what I'm talking about right here. He stood for personal liberty, and he capitalized it. That's my hobby, personal liberty. Liberty to live your own life, do as you please, so long as you don't encroach upon others. In France, I see where chorus girls who take part in so-called indecent plays are to be punished publicly by the audience in the most outrageous and indecent manner. Uphold the morals of our land, bray the good citizens, flapping their long ears most ingenuously. Do you think old John L. would stand for anything like that? Well, I can fairly see him pounding on a handy bar with a hammer-like fist and bellowing, "On with the play! Back up, you scuts! Let the girls dance bare naked if they want to. What the hell is it to us? Talk back is all. There, take him out and trunch some rather on him, and he'll be coming on to presently." He's trying to talk in Irish brogue there. "My name's John L. Sullivan, and I can like any son of a bitch in the world." That's what he'd say. Yeah. Put it there, old John L. If the orthodoxies are right, we may get together someday, meaning he's going to go to hell. And I want, if we do, to reach over the coals and take your hand, wicked old mitt, and say, "John L., you damn old sinner. You live like a swan, you guzzle booze in every city in the world. You paraded the Bowery, the slums, and the Barbary Coast, but by Satan, old boy, you're a better man than the pious sons of bitches that are smiling. I told you so, is to see us sizzle." Put her there. And I could go on. And here's a kid who's already defined himself by his hero, one of his 2 heroes, Shark being the other. And I had always known that it was in the stories, but now I have proof. It was one of those things where I went, aha, I knew it.
One of those moments.
And if you're somebody that follows the game and the history of the game, when I say the game and I mean boxing, you realize, wow, there's a lot of gold in these books, because this is a kid telling you how he really feels. I mean, really feels. He doesn't give a shit if he's going to hell. He's going to live the way he wants to. He's going to walk down the street, and he's going to He's gonna walk down these streets like he did. He's gonna be shadow boxing. He's gonna be doing his thing. He's gonna be shouting out the story as he goes, and he does not care how people perceive him. At least he doesn't care enough to stop acting the way he is. And he's gonna simmer. He's gonna hold those things tight. Those things that make him angry. And you're like, wow, the boxing stories provides you this opportunity to see your hero, as a human, not just as a great writer. So that's what I wanted to, say. I wanted to get across just how those stories are.
Very good. We're going to wrap it up because there's beer cooling. But I have a quick announcement. Would somebody lantern me? This is a special volume. I got permission from Fight Card Press to actually premiere it here at Robert E. Howard Days. I like these stories so much that I've been trying for 15 years to figure out how to do them without actually doing Sailor Steve Costigan, because I'm a believer that you can't write like Howard. But I could do my own weird historical boxing stories. And these are fictitious stories of Tom Sharkey after he leaves the prize fighting ring. I just want to read just a little bit of it to give you a taste. I'll have these for sale over here, yeah. I had thrown a variety of my best rights and lefts, the likes of which would have taken anyone else's head off had they landed. However, those big pinwheeling arms kept rotating and knocking my fists out of the air, even as I was counterpunching. I felt like a flat-footed dove fighting this scrap metal monkey, and it was irritating me more than somewhat. I backed off, my arms numb at the elbow from hitting on the I-beams this thing had for wrists. No sooner did I put my guard back up, when the monster's long slicing left actually looped around my gloves and caught me in the side of the head. I dropped to the ground with a bunch of Chinese gongs going off in my ears. What a punch! It felt just like getting hit by a horseshoe thrown by an elephant. I got up quickly, but the robot had backed off. The crowd was laughing and clapping like they'd just seen a show. Kane was talking again, but I couldn't hear him for all the ringing in my ears and the roaring, fighting Irish blood surging through me. I wasn't going to be made a fool of, not by some scrap metal monkey. This is from Sailor Tom Sharkey and the Electric Gorilla. I wear the boxing stories on my sleeve when I'm writing these. So I'm real excited about this. If you want it as an ebook, you can get it there on Kindle. But I brought these specifically to Cross Plains for the other fight fans, these have been a labor of love, and I'm really glad that they're finally in print. So I have just a few, if anybody's interested after the presentation.
I failed to ask if anybody had questions.
We usually do questions.
We can answer them over there as well.
Yeah. Well, since we're running long, let's all go get a beer.
One last thing to say. When at the foundation we decided to do the boxing books, and I knew that the two people I wanted to do those books with are here, Mark and Chris, and I hope that after 1 hour now, you know why I wanted them. They are. It's been a privilege working with those guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
Let's get one Howard picture pose of all of us together. Yes. I wish we had time.
A real nice photo op.
Yeah, fighters. Look at those forearms.
Don't smile.
There they are, Mo, Larry, Curly, and Shemp.
No!
There you go.
Mark and I have a